No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now. No matter how hard you try.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special edition of Truth Radio. I am your lovable co-host, Sean. Ladies and gentlemen, the government hates you. You were taught that the United States Constitution, written by our founding fathers, was the most important document regarding individual freedom ever written in the history of mankind, followed only by the Magna Carta. You believe that the Constitution set up a central government with limited powers, and that the powers not listed in the Constitution was left for the states and the people which make up the states. You believe that the powers of the central government were limited, and that the powers of the individual states were indefinite, to quote James Madison. You believe that the first 10 amendments, known as the Bill of Rights, gave each of the citizens rights given to them by their creator that no government, led by any man, could take away. That is why the government hates you. They hate the Constitution. They hate our Bill of Rights. They hate our freedoms. And they are doing everything they can to take these away from us. Is this an overstatement? Is this being extreme? Hardly. For years, the federal government has been attacking anyone that believes in a strict interpretation of the United States Constitution, labeling them as, quote, extremists or potential domestic terrorists. We saw this with two documents recently released within the past few years, namely the Department of Homeland Security's report on right-wing extremism and the infamous Missouri Information Analysis Center, or MIAC, report on homegrown terrorism that linked libertarians, returning Army vets, gun owners, constitutionalists, Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin. They linked all of these to white supremacists and potential criminals. And now, yet another document has been released by the Department of Justice, titled Investigating Terrorism and Criminal Extremism, Terms and Concepts, that proves without a shadow of a doubt that the ruling class, made up of people from both political parties, i.e. the powers that be, have nothing but contempt for the United States Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our American sovereignty. The so-called glossary, Investigating Terrorism and Criminal Extremism, Terms and Concepts, it's a glossary, and described itself as a tool, quote, a tool for criminal justice professionals to enhance their understanding of words relating to extremist terminology, phrases, activities, symbols, organizations, and selected names that they may encounter while conducting criminal investigations or prosecutions of members of extremist organizations, end quote. And like most things that come from the federal government, it is filled with lies. But that won't stop them from disseminating this glossary of ill-defined terms to local law enforcement all over the country. But how ill-defined are these terms? Are all the terms listed within them ill-defined? Not at all. The problem is with the terms that are typically associated with those involved in the American Patriot movement, i.e., the movement of citizens concerned with the integration of America into a global governing and economic system, or as George H.W. Bush used to call, the New World Order. And the fact that these terms are in a glossary that links those that use these terms with potential criminals, extremists, potential terrorists, it's unspeakable. The terms are typically defined in this glossary as those used by, quote, conspiracy theorists. Terms like genetically modified organisms, precious metal dealers, Council on Foreign Relations, Constitution Party, Bilderberg, etc. Conspiracy theories? Hardly. Not when you actually read the mainstream articles about scientists altering the DNA of crops with pesticides and viruses. Not when you realize that the price of gold has almost increased $1,000 in the last decade alone, and in the last four weeks, we've hit over 1,300 day after day after day. Not when you read the articles about sterilizing the water supply, called for by our own science czar, John Holdren. Not when you read the quotes and read the documents written by prominent political leaders that belong to and speak at the Council on Foreign Relations. And that is what I'm going to do right here, right now. Every one of the definitions of terms in the glossary regarding the Patriot movement is misleading or an outright lie. And that is what we will expose. When we do that, it will be clear as day as to why the government hates you and why they are doing everything they can to silence you, especially by silencing and censoring the internet. For the sake of organization, these terms will be listed categorically and not alphabetically. For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global and political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, well, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. The infamous quote from David Rockefeller in his autobiography, Memoirs, co-founder of the Trilateral Commission, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and a frequent member and attendee of the Bilderberg meetings, is at least some proof that some people are in fact working towards a world governing system where the sovereignty of the individual countries is sacrificed, and where policy for each nation is decided by an international body, rather than a local or national body. The mere fact that we have a European Union is proof enough. This glossary defines Bilderberg Group, Council on Foreign Relations, New World Order, One World Government, and Trilateral Commission very similarly, by asserting that, quote, right-wing extremists and conspiracy theorists, that these organizations, they believe they are attempting to control the world and usher in a one-world government. But all one has to do is read the above quote from David Rockefeller, who founded the Trilateral Commission, to see that this is in fact a reality. He stated it himself, and admitted to conspiring to do so. Those were his words. But that isn't enough for the Department of Justice, and so let's look even further into these organizations. First, let's look at the Council on Foreign Relations. A list of members should be enough to make anyone raise their suspicions, because their membership reveals that they all share a common interest. The entire roster can be found on the Council on Foreign Relations' own website. It's called the CFR 2009 Annual Report. Generally speaking, the organization is a who's who of the political, banking, and corporate elite. They meet behind closed doors and discuss foreign and economic policy, hold public talks, and publish a public journal called Foreign Affairs, which can be purchased online on their own website. Current members include politicians Bill Clinton, Dick Cheney, who even made an effort, mind you, to not mention that he was a member during his election. He said that in a speech to the CFR. Other politicians, Senator Joe Lieberman from Connecticut, John McCain from Arizona, Senator John D. Rockefeller from West Virginia, our good old Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island, Senator Olympia Snowe from Maine, former Senator Fred Thompson from Tennessee, Senator John Warner from Virginia, the John Warner Defense Act, former Speaker Newt Gingrich from Georgia, former Secretaries of State Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, Henry Kissinger, Obama's science czar John Holdren. The list goes on and on. Among the political elite are members of the banking elite, just like former chairman of the Federal Reserve Alan Greenspan, Paul Volcker, Treasury Secretary / tax cheat Tim Geithner, and former Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, again, just to name a few. Among the corporate and financial elite are former and current CEOs, presidents, and vice presidents of huge worldwide corporations like Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Fannie Mae, American Express, Prudential Financial, Sony, Disney, First National Bank, Shell, Oil, Exxon, Xerox. Again, just to name a few.